Akkor kezdenénk ezt a mai konferenciánkat. Szeretettel köszöntöm Önöket a Republikon Intézet újabb konferenciáján. Ez ma az egyik legfontosabb kérdésről, a fiatalokról fog szólni. Én nagyon utálom hosszú évtizedes tanári pályám után, ami már jó rég volt, a Jövő generáció címűt, hiszen a fiatalok a jelen generációja, tehát őnekik az az életük, amit éppen élnek, az nem a jövő, hanem a jelenük. Ugyanakkor kétségtelen tény az, hogy ha a magyar helyzetet nézzük, és ma szerencsére nem csak a magyart fogjuk nézni, hanem lesz módunk, és köszönet ezért az Európai Liberális Fórumnak, ami rendszeres támogatója a rendezvényünk, ezt ritkán szoktam elmondani, mindig elfelejtem, de most eszembe jutott, ami lehetővé tette azt, hogy ez a konferencia egy nemzetközi kitekintéssel kezdődjön. 3 országban volt módunk egy kis kutatás keretében megnézni, hogy mit gondol a fiatal generáció a politikáról, mennyire résztvevője és hogyan a politikai életnek. Mi az a második részében, tehát az első részében a konferenciának egy reményeim szerint, én már láttam az anyagokat, nem csak reményeim szerint, hanem biztosan egy izgalmas összehasonlítási lehetőséggel állunk szembe. Abban maradtunk, hogy erről lesz is valami kiadványunk, tehát hozzáférhetőek lesznek maguk a kutatások is, hogy mennyiben azonos és mennyire különböző 3 ország, ugye Lengyelország, Olaszország és Magyarország fiataljainak politikai érdeklődése, elkötelezettsége, nyitottsága, probléma térképe. Erről fogunk tehát az első részben beszélni. A második részben pedig a magyar fiatalok helyzetéről, lehetőségeiről, aktivitásairól. Úgyhogy örülnénk, ha végig tudnák ülni a mai konferenciánkat. Mind a 2 rész szerintem kifejezetten izgalmas és érdekes. A magyar fiatalok ugye azért is egy izgalmas kérdés, mert egyrészt én magam, aki hosszú évekig voltam egy ma már nem létező párt kampányfőnöke, emlékszem még arra, amikor mindig arról beszéltünk, hogy egyrészt az SDS, most kimondom ezt a ma már nem létező nevet, jóval jobban áll a fiatal generációkban, mint az idősebb generációkban, majd mindig hozzátettük ehhez, hogy na jó, de a fiatalok nem járnak szavazni. Tehát ez a jól állás olyan sokat nem jelent. Ez abból a szempontból is érdekes, hogy épp a napokban került napvilágra, ez nem sikerült, a napokban vált láthatóvá az AVEC Research havi kutatása, aminek van egy olyan eleme, ahol megnézi, hogy hogyan áll a 2 jelenleg létező nagypárt a fiatalok generációjában, és ott a Tisza párt 28%-on, a Fidesz pedig 20%-on áll, tehát óriási, a messze hibahatáron túli különbség van, miközben országosan azért ennek a pont az ellenkezője látszik. Tehát nagy kérdés, hogy lehet, és ha igen, akkor hogyan megszólítani a fiatalokat, van-e tartalék politikai értelemben a fiatal generációkban, mit gondolnak a mai fiatalok akár a világban, tehát az Európai Unióban, akár Magyarországon megint nagyon utálom az ifjúság kifejezést, tehát a fiatalok problémáiról, lehetőségeiről. Erről szól ez a mai konferencia, örülök, hogy eljöttek, és akkor kezdjünk is bele.
Thank you very much for being here today. Köszönjük szépen, hogy eljöttek. I'm going to give the microphone now to Milos Hodun, the board member of the European Liberal Forum and the expert of the Projekt Polska Foundation, and he's also going to be on our panel. So actually, I'm giving you the microphone for a short introduction, a couple of welcome words, but then you're going to continue with your presentation within the panel. So, Milos, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for organizing this event. I didn't take any headsets, so I was listening to Gabor, and I was very proud because I could probably recognize 10 words, which is, I think, improvement in my Hungarian. And so my name is Milos Hodun. I'm from the European Liberal Forum, the board of the board of directors of the organization. ELF is a long-term friend of Republikon. We've been working. We as a foundation, we work all over Europe, not only in the European Union, but also in the Western Balkans, also in the Caucasus and in the Nordic countries, non-EU members. And we work to promote liberal ideas. We are a member organization-driven foundation, which means that most of the events, conferences, papers. Most of our work is actually done by our members, including Republikon, who is one of the key members, and we're very proud that we cooperate with Republikon, in particular in one of our most important topics, which is the rule of law, which is anti-populism. And this is also how I see this event. I see this event within this pillar of thinking about anti-populism, thinking about the rule of law, and thinking about the youth, because the role of the youth and engagement of the youth is crucial here. And I'm Polish, so I can, and I will tell you in a second, how important the role of the youth was in the elections of 2023, how much involvement of the youth and activism of the youth changed the result of the elections, and in consequence changed the government. So this is what we want to reflect, I think, in a broader picture in ELF, is how to use this power, this energy that the youth has for the better of our continent, for the better of our societies. So. Yeah, I think without further ado, we can continue with the panel. I encourage you to follow us on social media, to look up on the European Liberal Forum website to see what we do. There are all the papers, all the invitations for the workshops. Everything is there. And this is it. Okay, so the presentation I'm gonna show you, it's fully based on the data we collected within the research, which was coordinated by Republikon and organized by the European Liberal Forum, and it's about the youth, and it's about the youth engagement and youth activism before the elections, the European Parliament elections, and after the elections. Because we divided this research in two pieces. One was, as I said, organized before the EP elections, and then there was a kind of follow-up small research after the elections. But I think I'm gonna also comment a lot about what happened in general in Poland in last year, connected to the youth. There's gonna be plenty of data, so maybe I'll just be going a bit faster with some of the slides. Because I believe that it's more important that we have time for discussion about the topic. Yeah, also with you, with the audience, with people who are interested in the topic. So this is yeah. So I just picked some of the data. It's not all the data from the report. The full report can be found on the website. But there are the things that I find important. So firstly, we asked the young people, so people between 18 and 25, if they're in favor or against Poland's membership in the European Union. And still, as you can see, the majority of the people is definitely in favor. But compared to other data, not only from our research, but also from different surveys which are available in Poland, we see that the youngest generation of voters is the most Eurosceptical in Poland. And then I think we'll be able to compare it with my colleagues who will be presenting their data. But in Poland, this is a very clear observation. We see that the support for the European Union is the lowest among the youngest voters, and we also see that the support is decreasing, and many reasons for that, and in particular the 8 years of the authoritarian, like let's say peace rule, law and justice rule, has changed this attitude a lot. They've been using many resources to spread the message about the European Union they have, which was a very clear anti-European message, reducing European Union to the source of the funds, to be a big ATM for Poland, talking only about money, and if it comes to the values, basically saying that the EU is against the traditional Polish values. And I think we see the reflection of that in this data. We also conducted as a foundation another research last year about attitude of the youngest and the oldest group of voters about the euro, about the currency, and the differences were really striking. So the older generation supports euro much more than the youngest generation, and we saw. Then we also conducted focus groups, which also confirmed that. So we. And this is really worrying for us. Poland will have its presidency in the European Council starting January next year. After 14 years, Prime Minister Donald Tusk will take the presidency from Prime Minister Viktor Orban, which is special. I think atmosphere this time will be very different. 14 years ago, two gentlemen decided to play a football game as a friendly way to pass the presidency. I think this year will be very different. The atmosphere will be very different. We will see. I think it will be interesting to observe. But we have the presidency, and one of the things that the Polish administration is doing is actually trying to use the time of the presidency also internally to work on the European education and European information among the youngest segment of the population, to go back to schools with the so-called European clubs, which was this huge network of European clubs, like this extra curriculum activities that were extremely popular in Poland before 2004, and now they are kind of dead, most of them. But this will be the time actually to get them back to schools, to talk with the young people about what European Union is and why it is important, because these people were born in the EU, so they have very different attitude about what the EU is, and they have also very different perspective about what life not in the EU is. But okay, this was a very long introduction to this first slide. We can see that male youth has much more negative attitude towards the EU. Still, the vast majority of young males is in favor of the EU integration. But if we see more than double of young males are strongly against, they would say definitely against, and also almost double are rather against the membership in the EU, which I think we'll go to the reasons of that in a second. Also, what we see is that people who are rather interested in politics are more against the membership in the EU than those who are not interested in politics. And one more, I think, in this block, it's about party affiliations of people who are in favor or against. So we can see that the electorate of the current government parties, of the three blocks that are ruling Poland right now, so the Civic Coalition, the Third Way, and the Left are strongly in favor, and two parties or blocks against where the segment of anti-EU or anti-integration electorate is stronger is the Law and Justice, and also the far right Confederation. But I think it's very interesting because Confederation is considered in Poland, and I think especially in the European media, if you read them, that Confederation is the super anti-European party. But if you see still there's almost as many people who are against the European integration as those who are in favor of the European integration. So even Poland's far right cannot say that we want to leave the EU, because this will not resonate with their electorate. Their electorate is divided, so they took a very different approach right now. They don't say we want to leave the EU. They are saying, we kind of want to correct the EU. We want to take control over the EU, and they use a lot this notion of common sense. They say, European Union, the administration, their bureaucracy lacks common sense, and we're going to bring it back. We're going to give the common sense back to the European Union. Just a little side note is that the Confederation has 6 members of the European Parliament currently. Because Confederation is not a party, it's a block of 5 to 6 parties, depends how you count them. And these 6 MEPs represent 2 different parties, and 3 of them decided to join the new group on the European level together with the German AfD. So, which is striking, I think, for Polish ultra nationalists. They decided to join the party with like fascist or neo-Nazi roots. They're sitting in the same group in the European Parliament. The other 3 decided not to do it. So there is like a division there. Also, if it comes to the place of residence, the differences are not very big. The countryside, which is also in the common, the way the public opinion reacts normally is by saying that the countryside is Eurosceptical and big cities are super Euro enthusiastic. And as we can see here, the difference is not that big. Maybe in the countryside and in smaller towns, the number of people who are strongly in favor is smaller than in bigger towns and in the biggest cities, but the difference is not that big. We also asked about what the European Union gives us, or what the accession of Poland to the European Union, if it had positive or negative impact on these different categories. So definitely young Polish people see that there was a positive change in economy, business, and in living conditions, but also in the infrastructure, which is, I would say, a very natural consequence of the propaganda or information that we've had actually since the beginning of our integration. So it doesn't matter who was in power, if it was Law and Justice, but also previously democratic forces from the left or from the right. Everybody was talking about money. No worries. So everybody was talking about money, and I think we can see it here. So if Poles see the positive things in the EU, they're all connected with the funds, with money, with infrastructure, something that was very present in the public discourse. What's very interesting, for example, if you look at the religiousness of Poles, like Polish people don't see that it has changed anything. In general, if it comes about to the values, the family, the religion, so the topics that are used commonly by the right wing, who is saying that European Union is destroying all that, is destroying traditional Polish family, is destroying Polish faith, is destroying the tradition. Polish people do not see that. They do not see that there has been any changes there. We also ask young people how much they are interested in politics. So as you can see, more of them said that they are interested in politics than those who said they are not interested in politics. But actually this threshold was very low. So it was enough to say that you follow information about politics, that you read party manifestos or programs, which was enough to be categorized as a person who is interested in politics. Also, as you can see, there is not a big difference between parties. I think the only interesting thing here is the third way, who has more people not interested in politics than other parties. The third way is composed of two parties in Poland, which is the PSL Farmers Party, but also this Poland 2050 party created by a guy who was a host of Poland Got Talent for 15 years. So this was the newcomer to Polish politics. And so he attracted many voters who were not voting before, just like being a celebrity. And I think this is the reason for that. And imagine we had a referendum on leaving the EU. Would you vote to stay or leave? And majority, over 70%, 72% of young people said they would vote to stay. 10% would vote against, and then there is this worrying group also of 20%. And again, we can see in many Polish surveys, in much of the Polish research, that this group who is saying hard to say is actually growing. So we do not see that this group who is saying yes, we are against is growing rapidly, but we say that this gray zone is growing. So we are convinced that it will be more and more. It will be more and more easy in the future actually to convince people to say, okay, now it's time to say we are against. And also when we do focus groups, we see that even people who are saying we're in favor, this support for the EU is not unconditional anymore. It was maybe not unconditional at the beginning some years ago, but people were not asking these additional questions. And now we can see in focus groups that even if you ask a question, even if a person says yes, I'm in favor, so it's very easy to convince them actually that I'm in favor, but I'm not so sure. So in the focus groups of supporters in general, we see that it's very easy it's enough to have one person who will be a bit more Eurosceptical to plant all these questions and among other participants who are leaving actually the group with many questions, and we see that their attitude is like, yes, we're in favor, but, and this but, it's a very good field or very good pond to fish for Eurosceptical people, because these buts are actually I believe created by Eurosceptical parties and Eurosceptical rhetorics, and I think these people who are having these buts or saying these buts right now, they can easily in the future be moved to this I'm against group of the society. Also, again, this question resembles the previous question about the party support or voter support to the European Union. We see that the far-right confederation has the biggest chunk of the of voters who are against or who would vote against in the referendum. followed by the law and justice parties, and in other parties, so the parties of the current government, this group is very, very small. So it's like it's 3% or less. Also, this is the same with the cities, but I will skip that. Okay, very small font. Which problems do you consider the most important? This is the question we asked, and we're looking for answers in 3 categories: personally for you, for Poland, and for the European Union. So if it comes, I would just comment it very briefly. So if it comes to what's important for you, Polish young people were basically talking about cost of living, prices, inflation, and housing, plus women's rights, which is, I think, a very Polish topic in this context. The research was done before the EP elections, so after the parliamentary elections, but still no changes were seen in the area of the abortion rights in Poland, which was one of the key topics for last year's, for the general elections of 2023. But here, I think young people see that for Poland the same things are important or should be important for Poland, for the state. Also, they add the questions of security, and again we have to bear in mind the context and the war in Ukraine and how important it is for Polish people. But if you see what Polish people believe is important for the European Union, you can see that this is the number one is climate, in environment. We can see also migration in borders and some parts of the security. But we can see this big, I would say, discrepancy between the young Polish people and what they believe it's important for them personally, and what European Union takes care about, what's important for it. So Polish young people say what's important for us, it's housing, it's prices, it's inflation, and what European Union does is climate and it's security, and it's also the bureaucracy. So the European Union is this kind of a foreign, this alien who is thinking about or who is dealing in areas that are not as important for us as other topics. We ask young people also in their involvement in the European Parliament elections. So as you can see, the group of people who are not involved is a bit bigger than those who are involved or highly involved. Most of them, they consider that they were involved because they got familiarized with political programs, and less people were participating actively. Still, 40% of people, 42 were active on social media. So this was, let's say, the most popular after getting familiarized with party programs, and only 13% were actually active, let's say, on the streets, like in campaign and action with hanging posters, or 15% were attending meetings with candidates in real life. So again, this bar to say yes, I was active was very low. And this is the part of the research we did after the elections. So we ask, okay, now when you know the results, are you happy? Do you think it was worth participating and voting? So vast majority of the people say yes, we are happy with the result of the elections. And I think this will be the last one. Yeah. So this was the last part. I would like to stress here that. After this huge mobilization in 2023, again, October 23, Poland had elections, and we had 73% turnout, the highest in Poland's history. What I always stress is that more people went to vote against peace, were mobilized to vote in the elections of 2023 than Polish people who went to vote against Communist Party in 1990s. In 1990. So this is, I think, a very important thing. And also what we could see last year is that 16% points more of young people went to vote last year. So women and the youth were two groups who decided about the success of the current government last year, because more than 20% points more of women and over 16% point of young people went to vote last year. And these two groups predominantly voted for the back then opposition current government. This year in the European elections, the turnout was much lower, was around 40%, which was even lower than in previous European elections. So these elections are seen as something very different, and I think it's connected to, among other things, that the young people see the issues that European Union is dealing with as something that they are not that are not as important for them as other things that are also important for the Polish government. And I think I will finish here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Milos, and I would like to ask Antonio to continue. And pardon my Italian, I just wanted to introduce, but I have to read this out because I speak zero Italian. But Antonio is a researcher of Rete Italiana per il Dialogo Euro-Mediterraneo. Great. So, yes, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'm a young researcher. This is my first research outside Italy, so there is a bit of emotion. So the title of my presentation is inspired by the title of today's conference. And it is also the question that stays behind our research. What do youth want? In Italy we say this, you know, we speak with the hands, and but actually this is the real question behind the research, because it's difficult sorry, it's difficult to understand what the youth want, which idea of future they have, and also what do they expect from older people and from the institution particularly. So before getting into the research, I would like to introduce you about the landscape of parties in Italy, because actually we have a right-wing government, and one of the reasons because the right-wing parties win the last election, national and also European elections, is because the left coalition is just these two parties. And the strange thing is that in the regional and municipal elections, all the parties are against the right, and they used to win. But when it comes to national or European elections, they go everyone with it on its own, and so the right wins. And this is what happened in the national and European elections. But there is something I think interesting, particularly for those who are committed in political communication, because these two parties that are the extreme right and the extreme left obtain much more votes than expected. Even themselves didn't expect so much votes. So how did they do it? Well, about the left party, the trick was Ilaria Salis. Do you know her? Do you? Oh, yes. Okay. Well, she's been arrested here in Budapest for making something illegal, and that's normal. But when in Italy we saw these pictures, the opinion had like a shock. And the left party took advantage of this, and they chose to candidate her at the European elections, and she obtained 176,000 votes. That is one of the most voted in Italy, one of the most candidate. Sorry. Okay, she took a lot of votes. Sorry, and now she's a member of European Parliament, and 4 days after the election, she's been released. So now she's in Italy. She's a free person. On the other side, on the right side, there is Roberto Vannacci. There is a general of the army, was a general of the army, now he's retired. He wrote a book. The book's called The Upside Down World, Il Mondo al Contrario, that soon became like the flagship of extreme right, because the parties of extreme right disappeared in the last year. So he got into the space of the extreme right with these books. What did he write in this book? He wrote something against homosexual, something against feminists, and something against immigrants. Paola Gono is the the captain of the Italian volleyball, and he used to say things at the border of racism, I say, because it's not clearly racist, but you know, he speaks to the extreme right that have this kind of attitude towards the immigrants. And he took 500,000 votes. So now he is a member of European Parliament for Italy. What can we learn from this case? We can learn that people are actually interested in politics. We try to, how to say it? We try to think that people are not interested, but actually they are. The problem is that sometimes the politicians themselves and the institutions speak a language that is not comprehensive. And, but when we embody the big values like human rights or other conservative values, when these values are embodied in one person, so people get interested, people get involved. They go to vote, they want to say their voice, they participate. So now let's dive into the research. Our research has been a survey, basically, and it's divided in 3 chapters. The first one, what do they do? What do they think? How do they feel? We are speaking about young people between 18 and 25. So the first one is what do they do? And it's the easiest way to collect data, because you can measure what they do. You ask them what they do, they tell you, and you take the data. The first result, the first question, and the first, I think, interesting result is that there is a big difference between the national results, where the right parties got very close to 50% of votes, and the result of our survey. Young people, not only in our survey, but actually it's like that, tend to vote left-wing parties and center parties. And the yellow one is an independent party, but its ideals, its values are in the middle, a bit of left, a bit of right. So we put them in like a progressive party, but not left party. So the first difference is this one. This is the same results, but in a different shape. So you see the national results, almost 50% to the right, the young voters, almost 50% to the left. This is the first interesting result. Then we try to understand the level of engagement on young people. We did it making some questions. Like, for example, which, if they actively participate to the last EU election campaign, we see that 50%, more or less, are interested. They participated once a month or once a week, even if almost nobody is officially subscribed to a party. There is interest, but yes, I participate, but I don't want to commit so much. I don't want to put a target on me. When we come instead to the participation to civil life, like organizations or NGOs, the percentage is higher, 73%. And it's even higher when we go to ask them if they used to participate to a debate about politics. It's even higher. So what can we learn from this data? We can learn that the lower is the commitment, the higher is the participation. If you, for example, speak to someone young about 2050 net zero carbon and something like that, people say, okay, don't talk to me like that. They want to, they are interested in politics, but the level of communication must be something from today for tomorrow. People don't like to hear about very long-term projects. And this is it. The young people, for example, I live in Rome. There are many universities, and I see that young people often participate to breaks or strikes, and but they don't want to commit themselves to a long-term project. So in this case, the populism, Miloš was talking about populism. We used to say that populism is something bad. No, the populism, okay. Democracy and populism seem to be like opposite. But we can use the populism also to spread good values. Populism, it's a way to communicate, no, in my opinion. And I think it can be used also for progressive values and not only for conservative values. The second chapter is what do they think? Do you know him? Yes. Okay. What do they think? So the first thing we asked is their attitudes towards Europe, Italian membership in Europe, and on the opposite side of Poland, young people are very pro-Europeans. They especially those ones who vote left. And we also asked what do they think if Italy would exit from EU, because in the last years we had a party in Italy that was called Italexit, because this feeling of exit from Europe what we thought was spreading a lot, but actually it didn't, at least among young people. This is a confirmation of what I said before, that most of the people have universalist values, like they care a lot of human rights, of environment, etc. So this confirms what I said before. Then we try to understand which people are more Eurosceptical or are more in favor of Europe, and we saw that it's obvious result, but we saw that those who vote for the right, they trust more in local institutions, and those who vote center or left trust more in Europe, UN, and President of the Republic. There is like over Italian government institution, so they are more like in favor of Europe. This is something that in Italy has been quite shocking for us. We didn't expect this kind of result. We asked their level of trust towards non-political organizations, and there are two results that we didn't expect. The first one is the high level of trust in school and university, because if you speak to every student in Italy, he complains often about the school that is not good enough to give you, let's say, it's not a good quality school, but actually they trust a lot. And here there is like it would be interesting to go deeper inside this result, because there is like in Italy there is like a problem with generations, because it seems, but nobody studied it, but it seems that actual young people don't trust the generation of their fathers, but of their parents, but they trust a lot the generation of their grandparents. And this would be, for example, a next research. But the most shocking result was the low level of trust in religious organization. This was a question that I wanted to insert in the research. since I'm obsessed with the religion. And but the result is amazing. So I mean, where are the values? I mean, we seem to be a conservative country, but young people don't trust religious organizations. And the first question is why. So I don't know. If you ask me, I say I don't know. But this result is going to be for sure the beginning of a new research on. About this, because we have not only we have the Vatican in Italy, so the presence of the church is very strong, but we study religion 1 hour. The students study religion 1 hour every week, from the first year of elementary school to the last year of high school. It's 13 years in which we study religion, and after I saw these results, I wrote to a magazine of atheists, and they say, for example, that the ministry doesn't release the number of those people who don't want to study religion. So there is something mysterious on this. Maybe next year, if I'm here, I may give you some more information about. So the result of the second chapter is this one, is that as for the commitments, young people don't want to put a target on themselves. They want to be free to choose. They want to be themselves. But this is a good news, but also a bad news, because at least in Italian society, the youth is characterized by a great individualism. They seem to not have consciousness of being of how much power they can get if they act in groups. They tend to be individuals, and this is not a good news. So the last chapter, how do they feel? This image is not casual. You will understand at the end. And to understand how do they feel, we use the lens of political issues. And we first ask them which is the global issue, the biggest global threat in this moment in the world, and they obviously answered the climate change. Then we asked which is the issue that European institutions should face with higher priority, and they said climate change. And then we asked which issue Italian institutions should face with higher priority, and the result is not climate change. The result is national health system. This is unexpected result, because you may imagine, we imagine that young people, they all feel well, they live in good health, so they are not concerned with the health service or with their own health. In fact, this result leads to the last, no, not the last, there is other 2 slides, but this is a very important result, because we asked to the youth which is the biggest personal problem. The first one, we divide economic and job is not the same thing. Economic concern is about the fear to don't have enough money to make a decent life in the future. And this happens because of the war, because of the many crises, the inflation, like in Poland, and this is their bigger concern. The second is job. Well, on this war, I need to stop for 1 moment, because what young people consider a good job is not what their parents or grandparents consider a good job. In fact, for a young Italian, a good job is not only a job that gives a good wage, a lot of money, but particularly it's a job that allows them to have a good life-work balance. It is a characteristic that is appearing always more in the in the labor market. The third one is, I think, the most unexpected result, because 50% of young declared that they are facing with mental health issues like anxiety, depression, solitude, etc. In Italy, for example, there is a growing phenomenon that is called hikikomori. Okay, people, particularly boys, tend to stay at home. They don't want to have a social life, and this is a consequence of the individualism that I was saying before. But this problem of mental health, that you can say it's just 15%, okay, but we, Europe, we are having a demographic decline. So we, in the future, there will be always less young people. So we will have less young people, psychologically fragile, and we are going to face in the future, we like Europe, need to face the competition with other countries like, I don't know, India or Saudi Arabia or these growing countries. How do we do it? This is the question. How do we face the competition with these countries in the future if we don't have young people, and those that we have are so psychologically fragile? And this is a problem that also the Italian Statistical Institute, National Statistic Institute, wrote in a research last year. They realized that not only 1 person on 3 declare to fear the future, exactly as we discovered in the research, but 34% of them would live outside the country. This is a really bad result for us, because we, the policymaker particularly, should work more on a policy of retention, because many countries, for example, in Italy, many engineers are now living in Dubai, where they are very well paid, or many doctors, they work in Switzerland because the wage is much better than in Italy. And so we risk to lose the most skilled people because they go outside Italy. So the policymakers should try to use retention policies about this issue. And that's it. So in a word, how can we consider the future generation? I would call it the anxious generation. And we should, I think, should take into account this anxiety. We should know it. I don't know, how many of you are 18, 25? Between 18 and 25? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. We need to reach young people. We need to reach young people because it's very important. And for example, one of the chapter of the Pact for the Future. Hello, get inside, please. Yes, of course. And are you between 18 and 25 years old? No? No, okay. But it's in. So you're not an anxious generation. So, okay. Okay, so I was telling that the UN Pact for the Future, one chapter is about integration of young people in the policy-making process. So this is going to be our future. We are going to face very, very dangerous challenges, because if we continue like this, we continue to make policies made by old people for old people, in a world, I don't know, in 15 years we become like a colony of India or China. This is my thought. Thank you.
Antonio, thank you very much. And lastly, I would like to give the floor and the microphone to our own researcher, Már-már from Republikon Intézet. So Marty, please give us your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for my fellow panelists for an excellent presentation or excellent presentations. I would say I will try to keep it brief, but I have a problem with that, so I will try. So this was a really good project where we had three institutions from three different countries do their own research on youth. We had many questions that were the same across the three researches, but there was a twist in all three of them, something personal for that country, for that institution. In the case of the Hungarian research, we had an excellent chance to compare, not only with our international fellows, but also the young people with the entire Hungarian population, because we conducted two surveys at the same time. We conducted 1,000 people research of the adult population and 800 of the young, aged between 18 and 25. So throughout this presentation, you will see data comparing the entire Hungarian population to the Hungarian youth. And let's get cracking. Oh, and also some data from the European Social Survey, because they have so much data and they are very relevant data, it would have been a crime to miss out on them. So the first topic that I would like to touch on is the youth and how they approach the EU, not physically, but mentally. So first of all, as opposed to Poland, and just like in Italy, we see that young people in Hungary are more in favor of the EU than the older generations. We see instantly from this data that everyone is more in favor of the EU. Over 80%, or actually 80% of everyone would vote to remain in the EU right now, but 86% of young people would do it, so more young people would vote to stay in the EU compared to, let's say, the 60 plus, who is only 77% in favor of staying in the EU. And the same can be observed if we ask if European unification has gone too far, or if it should go further. We see that young people are more likely to say that they want a more unified EU, but we see that we don't want to leave the EU, but it's also apparent that people are very split on the issue of whether the EU unification should progress further than it is from this point, from the point in time that is right now. Even the young people are split 50-50, or should I say 40-40, because the middle 22% don't really know what to think. But the same amount of young people who think we should have a more unified EU also think that we should have a less unified EU, or that the EU that we have now is already too unified. The number in the oldest generation, 60 plus, is 50% that say the EU unification has gone too far, so half of the oldest generation already are Eurosceptical. So in this case, we see that young people, again, are more friendly towards the EU, but on the issue of whether this is a progressing unification is good, they are split. And there is also the question of institutional trust. The EU is an institution, but there are also other institutions. We see that in the case of every institution, young people are less trusting than the entire adult population. No matter if we ask about politicians, if we ask about the EU, the police, young people trust institutions less. And you may think that this is a small difference, but it's an average score, so this is actually a very large difference in some cases. For example, the trust in politicians and political parties, the youth are much less trusting towards political parties. We see, of course, that everyone is least trusty towards politicians and most trusting in Hungary, at least, towards the police and the legal system, and then international organizations, or should I say, technically they are supranational organizations. So yes, anti-political sentiment is part of the Hungarian way of thinking, but also more so the youth are also more against politicians than, let's say, everyone else. So from this we see that the support for the EU is highest among the youth, but we see that they are split on the issue of unification, they are less trusting of all institutions compared to other adults, and especially in the case of politicians. And now we see the interest in politics, now that we laid that out, is a significant difference. Half of 18, 25-year-olds say that they are not at all interested in politics. A further 32% say they are hardly interested, which means that the overwhelming majority of youth say they don't care about politics at all. In fact, half of them say they don't want to hear about it. And compared to everyone else, only 27% of everyone else thinks they don't want to hear about it. So twice as many young people who just don't want to hear it. And only, I think it's 8% of young people are really interested in politics in Hungary. We saw even from the previous slides and from here that Hungarian public is very anti-politics. They go further and further away from political involvement, especially from political parties. There is a serious level of distrust, and this is not just because they are, let's say, opposition voters and the opposition is not doing that well, because also there are Fidesz voters in the young people, as we will see probably right now. Okay, not right now, but soon. And when we say actively involved in the campaigning of the EU elections, because as you may have deducted by now, this research was really partially about the EU elections and how young people relate to Europe and the European election, which just happened. We see that, especially, for example, compared to Poland, when I could see the numbers, they are much more active in campaigning and participation than in Hungary. Because in Hungary, basically 90% of people, all people, don't partake in any campaign activity. They don't go to events such as this one, so you are in the 10%, congratulations, you care. And they don't really listen to the speeches, they don't read the programs. Only 11% of young people and 10% of everyone read it. So very anti-political, very anti-involvement, but we see that the young people are not worse off than everyone else in this regard. In fact, there's a 1% difference in favor of young people. Of course, 1% doesn't matter in this case. But young people are just as involved in political campaigning, in political activism than everyone else, every adult. Only, unfortunately, this level of involvement is very low. And if we ask the political participation methods, there's many ways to participate in politics, to, let's say, express your views of politics. We see that young people are most likely to partake in boycotting certain products as a political action, such as not buying certain products. And like we saw in the case of the very interesting number in the case of the invasion of Ukraine, young people and all Hungarians drink a lot of alcohol, and the consumption of Russian vodka and alcoholic products fell sharply after, 1 year after the invasion of Russia in Ukraine. So boycotting products is here in Hungary, but we see it's a very small 5% number, which means that actually half of the people who partake in political action boycott products, but it's only 5% of young people or the adult population. Let's also see some differences between old people and young people. We see that the biggest difference is in a few areas of political action. We see that the adult population at large are more likely to contact a politician or a government official to express their views than a young person. And we see that the older generation is much more likely actually to share their views online. So while young people are much more active online, they are not active politically, let's say. They don't share their views publicly on social media, but the older generation is more likely to do it. They don't have as much fear from the threats of the internet, let's say, and the threats of being publicly judged. And all the other differences are very slight. We see that the only forms of political action that youth are more expressive in is boycotting, but even that difference is not very big. And maybe we could say that I don't know, displaying campaign badges is something that young people still do, but 3% is essentially nothing. Now for the party preferences, I'm sure this is the part that Hungarian viewers are most interested in generally. The willingness to vote in young people is very low. But you think, oh, it's almost 80%, that's great. But if you're a researcher, if you do party preference research, you will immediately know that people who say they would likely vote, that 16%, you can deduct it immediately, they will never vote. Or actually, we shall see now, I'm going to talk about this soon, because things are looking to shake up a bit. 62% of young people say they would vote. Generally, this is much higher the number of people who say they would, than those of the voters who turn up to the booths. They just say they would vote, but they don't go. And 68% of everyone would vote. The participation is still really high after the election. Usually, it can go down after an election, but now it stayed relatively high, but the young people are less likely to vote. And if we look at party preferences, this is from July, we see that it's very different. The adult population at large, we asked the party preferences after the European elections. Oh, actually, this is who did you vote for? So we asked them who they voted for. Sometimes they will, let's say, follow the winner in the sense that after an election, people decide who the winner was, and the research after the elections, the winning party is more favorable in political party research. Now we see that the results, the population results for party preference is about the same as the EP results. Fidesz, the governing party with Viktor Orbán at the helm, 41%, and Tisza party, the newly emerged party of Péter Magyar, gets 29%, exactly the same as on the election. So there's not, either there is no really going towards the winner in preferences, or the voters just don't know who really won. Because of course Fidesz won, they got the most seats, but it is also their worst EP results since we are in Europe, or in the European Union rather. And they have the least amount of seats since we are in the European Union. So they also suffered a big loss. While for Tisza, in a few months, they reached 30%. It's been many years since an opposition party or coalition could reach 30%. And if we look at the youth, we see that Tisza voters, the voters of the new party, are even more. 37% of young voters said they would vote for Tisza, and only 26% of young people would vote for Fidesz. Still, Fidesz is the second largest party in the youth, but significantly less powerful than Tisza. The other differences that are interesting, we see that Momentum Party, which is the only proclaimed liberal party in Hungary, has over twice as many voters in the young generation than in everyone else. So 12% of young people would vote for Momentum if they vote, and 5% of the entire population. And the last, I would say, interesting results is that also the pirate party, which is two-tailed dog party, they are not a pirate party because in Hungary we don't use this term, but they are sort of an anti-politics party. They do better. The far right, Mi Hazánk or Our Homeland, does better also among the youth. And the Democratic Coalition, which was the strongest opposition party until last year or the beginning of this year, does very poorly. In fact, they have half as many votes among young people than the entire population. And if we see the party preferences, this is not the question of who you voted for. This is actually who you would vote for right now. We see essentially similar numbers. Tisza is stronger, and we see that the only big difference here between this result and the previous, this slide, you will see it's the yellow. The yellow is the two-tailed dog party. They suffer from the fact that their voters are anti-politics, which also manifests in them not going to the votes. We see that young people, 15% of young people almost say that they would vote for the two-tailed dog party, and only 6% of everyone else. But if we look at even the young people, if they voted for the two-tailed dog party, only 8% did. The two-tailed dog party always does better in the polls than in the booths, and this is a problem that they are facing. They were actually projected to probably enter the European Parliament just months before the election, but in the end they didn't. And finally, I shouldn't say finally because I know there's one more slide, but we asked if looking back at this election, people think it was worth voting. It's important to note that after the election of 2022, which was a disastrous election for the opposition, over 2/3 of opposition voters said that they feel like the government cannot be changed through an election. So they were so disillusioned with the elections, so disappointed in the results, that they said, you can change this government in an election. And we know that the majority of young people are voting for the opposition, and still we see that after this election, the majority of Hungarians believe that the election was worth going, even knowing the results, which immediately reveals to us that the opposition voters are not so disillusioned, disappointed with this election as they were in 2022. It's a very interesting data. And finally, we have problem perception. This is also a very interesting difference between Poland, Italy, and Hungary. First, looking at the entire population, we see that the biggest problem for them is low quality of healthcare, followed by high cost of living and food, housing and food, and then the state of democracy. But if we look at young people, we see that the state of democracy and rule of law is #1 priority in the issues, and only then comes low quality of healthcare, again, because they go to the doctors much less. And then, of course, high cost of living and so on. What's important to note here are differences between the large differences between the older generation and younger generation. First off, younger generation care more about state of democracy and rule of law. They care more about the shape of the Hungarian economy, and they care much, much less about the threat of war. So the threat of war, that has been the flagship project of Fidesz and Orbán's campaign for the EP. Young people are unaffected by it. They don't care. They see through the communications tools, and they are not afraid that our country would drift into war, as opposed to the older generation. And we have to compare, of course, to Poland and Italy. We see that climate change is almost the last issue for the Hungarian youth and the Hungarian population. Again and again, we see in our measurements, in all the data revealed by other institutions, that climate issues are, Hungarians are just really putting their heads in the sand in the case of climate. They don't care. They don't find it important. And this has actually been decreasing. So more young people and more people thought climate change was important. It was a big problem 4 years ago. But the problems that we've had in the last few years, inflation, cost of living, shape of democracy, the war, and so on, it completely took the focus from climate change. So yes, they don't care about that, and they also don't care about the gap between men and women. So also female issues are not a priority even to the Hungarian youth, which is also very unfortunate. So we can draw two conclusions from all this. One is that young voters are, of course, less interested in politics. They are less active in politics in some regards. They don't want to vote as much. They don't like parties as much. But they are more friendly towards the EU. They care more about democracy. They care more about the economy. They care about the rule of law. And some issues prompt more activity from the youth, as they are more active in boycotting, they are more active in protesting, and so on. And the other thing is that essentially right now the youth willingness to vote is not as far from the willingness to vote of the entire adult population. It used to be much more different. Now, likely due to the emergence of TISA party and seeing their success, this feeling of having no effect on the election results is dissipating. People are more satisfied with the results of the election. And they are dissatisfied, of course, with the historic opposition, but for some reason, TISA party prompts more activity from them. And we can also see that some other smaller parties like Momentum and the Two-Tailed Dog Party, and unfortunately the far-right Mi Hazánk, also can hook some young people, the young generation. And this is something to watch for, because while, for example, the two-tailed dog party is generally underperforming their results in surveys and elections. The far right actually overperforms itself over and over again, and this is increasingly an issue in young people. Anyway, thank you for your attention.
Martin, thank you very much. And to have a discussion of all this, thank you very much for all of your presentations and for all the data that you shared with us. And I would like to ask you to join us on the stage so we can have a discussion of the results. So I have my own microphone here. To be completely honest, thank you again for all of your presentations. I have to start with complaining a bit, because all the results that you showed us are so different in many ways, and we could see that the problems that the youth faces, or that the youth considers to be the biggest problems for them, or their level of involvement in national level issues or politics is so different in all of the countries that you have spoken of. It's not easy to ask a question that would be relevant for all of your experiences and all of your studies. But I think one of the most striking similarity is that there is at least a seemingly contradicting finding of all these researches, which is that young people seem to be more interested in certain issues. They have a tendency to be very enthusiastic about certain issues. Let it be climate change, or in Hungary's case, surprisingly, climate change is somewhere at the bottom, but democratic values or the rule of law. However, their actual connections to political actors is very weak. They don't really like to be associated with political parties. They don't like to be committed to certain political actors. So this seems to be quite contradicting. How would you explain this gap between the level of actual political participation or actual connection with political parties and enthusiasm about certain specific issues? And I don't have a very specific order in mind, so whoever would like to start, please.
Sure. Hello? Yes. Yeah, so this is something that we've been observing for many years already, right? And the first things that comes to my mind is the general public, definitely in Poland, but I believe also in other countries, is just not interested in party politics, or is becoming less and less interesting in party politics. In Poland, according to the surveys, like around 2% of the population would even consider being members of political parties, which is one of the lowest in I think OECD. So this is one thing, and then you have the youth who is taking one step farther, and I think, as we saw in the Hungarian case, no, in Italian, it was close to zero, right? Yes. As one of the slides said, it's like close to zero, which would lead me to another comment coming from your presentation, is the commitment. Is just no will of taking the commitment, and especially the commitment to something that you do not like. So you don't like the parties, you don't want to take commitment. Why would you commit to do something or to support something that you don't like? And on the other side, young generation, I believe, just like any other generation, is interested in things and in issues and in changing their life and improving the conditions of their life. And there are different topics that they want to be connected with. So if you combine these two things, it means that this energy or this need to do something is being released somewhere else. So it's like these more action-like things. Not even NGOs, right? Okay, sometimes NGOs, but there is even something beyond NGOs. There's like this action things, little steps. And then if I look at Poland again, you could see that there are waves of activism. So first of all, there are these little bubbles that are growing, that some things become extremely popular, and then they grow and grow and grow, and sometimes they grow as much in the society and in the bubble of celebrities, in a bubble of influencers, then they reach also young people who get involved. And we had this in the case of protests against the, first of all, it was the first thing after peace came to power, in the case of the Supreme Court protests. So if it comes, people were not protesting against things like the Constitutional Night Tribunal because nobody understood what it was. Then people were not protesting when the Law and Justice took over the National Council of the Judiciary because nobody understood what the Council of Judiciary was. But then we had the Supreme Court, and they tried to take over the Supreme Court, and many people like engaged. It was the weather was good, so many people engaged, and I think it really played an important role. Many people engaged in protests in favor of the independence of the Supreme Court. They understood that. They understood the word court. They understood this is about really the courts, the justice, not like the tribunals or councils of judiciary. And this became viral. Like people really joined online, and more people, like once some people joined online, we could see more and more people online. It was the first time when actually young people appeared physically in front of the courts and were protesting. And then we have the black marches, the black strike, so against the abortion right, and also with a huge involvement of young people who were blocking the streets of big cities, who were involved in something that they found the most important, and it all finished with this 73% turnout last year. So yeah, I think there are issues important to young generation, and there's lower level of commitment, but that there are ways where they want to show that their activism. And also one last thing, I know that there's many thoughts here. I think also the political parties are changing, and in our countries, I believe, where the party system is still new, and it's changing so quickly, and the names are changing, and the brands are changing. Also, there is this lower level of commitment to this, because, I mean, why would I commit to something because this may change next week, or may change next month. So I'm rather connected to ideas and to those who are the loudest, supporting my ideas the most right now. And politics is, these days, it was also shown in my colleagues' slides, it's all about personalities, right? In our research, we say that we divided young voters or young people into the silent majority and loud and active minority. And this loud and active minority tend to, support actually the extremes. We see that most of them are on the extreme left and on the extreme right, when the personalities are, where simple solutions and personalities are. So they go there. So I think this is the mix of this different factors.
Okay. Well, in Italy, there are two. Well, basically, there is an historical perspective that I can use to give an answer to your question. There is the corruption, in one word, because we had, as I wrote in the paper that you can read when it's finished. In 1992, we had a great scandal. I'm going to finish soon. We have been a great scandal about politics. The judiciary, they made an investigation on Italian parliament members. And from 1992 to 1994, it came out that we had a center party, Christian Democracy. Almost all of them were corrupted. They finished their political career in that years. And some of them suicide also. They killed themselves. So there is a problem of trust. This is not only for young people, but for all Italians. About young people, this can be a sort of explanation in the historical perspective. But we also have a problem with the election law, because in Italy, when you vote for the municipality or for the region or for the EU, you choose the person you want to give the vote. But for national elections, you don't choose the person, you choose the party. And the party chooses the person that will represent. So you don't feel represented, because, you make a choice of a party, but I mean, you cannot choose the person, your candidate, and so this is another reason. The third reason, I think, is also communication issue, because communication and also the, how to say, the efficiency of politics. No, parliament, in Italiano Parlamento, means a place where people talk. No, and but they only talk. It's a place where people talk, but it's very difficult. Every time there is something new to do, it becomes a very slow process that goes forward and back, forward and back. And the new laws, those laws that would bring to a change in society are very hard to be done, because in the parliament people always need to find, the members of parliament need to find compromises. So compromises means being slow, and being slow means that people lose their enthusiasm on politics. And this is a, how to say, a way to work that is completely opposite to the real world. The real world is fast, is efficient, and gives you the answer to something very, very, very quickly. And this is also, for example, one of the reasons why the right-wing parties are not losing their, how to say, their votes. No, they keep their votes because they are very, I would say, intelligent, very smart. Because when it happens something, like for example, there has been a rave party in Italy, and the day after they made a law against the rave party. So it is completely unuseful law, because it's the repetition of other laws that have been made. But for the public, for the voters, the government is making something to resolve the problem quickly. And this is why the popularity of the right-wing party is still high. So I think the problem is on the communication method also.
Okay. I have the unconnected mic, so if someone attacks me, I can just throw it. So watch out. Anyway, Hungary is really interesting now, isn't it? Because we were repeating all of the same ideas as analysts over and over, nothing new under the sun. There are certain things that are set in stone on the opposition side in our political party system, and now with the emergence of the TISA party, we had to overwrite some of what we knew. The most interesting example of this to me is, if you remember when Momentum became a party, they ran for the elections. Of course, their success was, impressive, being a new party. They managed to grab 2 seats in the European Parliament, and then after that, in 2022, they got into the Hungarian Parliament. So that's good, but the biggest issue that voters raised with Momentum was that they have no history, they have no experience in politics. And they would rather vote for someone who knows more, who has experienced more, who was part of politics. And for example, this was Democratic Coalition, and they got many votes. And now, in the case of the TISA party, what's most appealing about them, or at least in my opinion, is that they are not part of of politics. They weren't part of politics, which is already kind of absurd, because the leader of the TISA party was working for the current government in different roles, and he is the ex-husband of the Minister of Justice, so he was in politics, and still he is somehow perceived as someone who is from outside of politics, or someone who is not a politician, who hasn't failed us yet, but knows a lot about politics because he was working with the government. So it's a really niche category. I don't know right now how to formulate a recipe as to who people would vote for, and especially who young people would vote for, is really difficult. Because we've seen other new parties emerge in the last few years, and they essentially all perished. And even if we thought that it's all about the one person, the face of the party, especially the parties that were formed in the last years were always the party of some guy who is famous or who has gained a lot of votes in the past. In the case of Gábor Vona's party, or a really extreme case of György Gattyán's party, who was not a politician, but is a very well-known person. And their parties didn't perform well at all. Or the party of Péter Jakab, who was the leading face of Jobbik, didn't even collect the necessary signatures to run. So the personality somehow isn't enough. It's hard to say whether not being in politics or not having history in politics is positive or negative, because in the case of Momentum, they said it's a negative. And in the case of the TISA party, they consider it a positive. There's new faces, fresh faces. And I don't know if this is because they are fresh or because people see that they have a chance of beating Fidesz. But when we really look at the results of the elections, any elections in which Hungarians take part, even though that people are less political, they don't like parties, they turn against parties, it's still the same amount of people vote, and they vote for the parties. So when we go to the elections, the turnout is the same, 70% or around 70%. In fact, on the EP elections, we had a record turnout. So, okay, people say they don't like parties, they are against parties, they don't like politics, but still they vote for the parties in the end. They vote just as much as they voted 10 years ago, if not more of them. So there's some recipe here or something here that we have to find, because obviously parties are still important, because there's a part of politics and administration deals something that requires a network, that requires an organized form of politics. But still we are anti-party, but we vote for them. So how do we crack the code here? If you're a party and you want votes, how do you get your votes? How do you convince others that they should vote for you if they are really just not, they don't want to hear your campaign, but in the end they will go and vote for someone? I don't know if I'm being understandable, but it's a really interesting conundrum.
Yes, thank you for all your answers, and I know that my question wasn't easy, and of course there are many aspects to this topic. It seems to be, I don't want to be putting words in your mouth, but it seems as a general conclusion from what all you're saying, it seems to be a big problem that while the young people are, at least in higher numbers, alienated from classical party politics than the general population or older voters. Of course, it's parties that are able to make political change. So if you really believe in a certain societal cause, as we all live in, at least we all live in parliamentary democracies, at the end of the day, the national assemblies of our respective countries have to make the laws that can directly contribute to changes. So there definitely seems to be a very difficult and rather self-contradictory situation there, and it's I think a very interesting question and a very interesting riddle for the parties and the political actors themselves for the future, how to solve this. And this is something actually that I'm sure that we are going to discuss in the second panel as well with our experts. But based on your research, there are so many things that we could elaborate on a bit more. There is one thing I would certainly like to ask you about, and that's the difference between the issues the young and the, well, let's say not so young, consider to be the most important for themselves or for their countries or for the EU, depending on what question they answered in your researches. Because regardless of what the exact answers were in each of the studies, we could see that there is always some level of difference, that there are generational differences. Different generations have different preferences. And I'm really curious about your opinion. I don't know if it's really measured or it can be measured, certainly not with one study. if what we are seeing is a general change of society's thinking. So new issues, new topics are becoming, through the younger generations, the main topics of the societies, like in the change of in the case of climate change, for instance, which was really not on the table like 30 years ago. Or these are generational issues, and those who are currently between the age of 18 and 25 are going to change their preferences. So actually, if you take a look at our society 30 years from now, the preferences would still remain the same as they are today. Is the people who are going to change. Yeah, I know. I have some great questions for today. I'm really interested in your thinking about this, so I'm not expecting any very scientifically based answer about a question on something that is going to be in 30 years from now.
Okay, thanks for the question. Being a sociologist, that's my field of study. So, as we saw before in the slides, when we asked about the global threats and the issue that European institutions should face with higher priority, they indicated the climate change. But when we came to national institution, national issues, they said the climate change was in the third place. This is because I think that young generations are like more conscious, have a higher consciousness about their future. They are concerned over their concern comes out, for example, because they don't understand, for example, that climate change. There is a. Can you hear me? I can. Okay.
I'm sorry, we really like this venue, but there are certain types of inconvenience that come with the.
No, I love. I say to you, I love this venue because it's informal venues. So in Italy, conferences like this are in very formal place, so people get bored very quickly. So inside a cafe is better, but we have inconvenience. So I was saying, it seems that from the research, young people are more conscious about the climate change problems that we will have in the future. But there is a new word in Italy. There is like eco-anxiety, anxiety of ecology. That is a problem, because it's a problem, but it's a double problem, because older generations try to stigmatize. Now they say, you have anxiety because you are a weak person, something like that. But actually it's not. It's because school have changed in the last years in Italy, and there is an interesting study of made in high schools that tries to understand what young people are interested and why they are so interested, they are so concerned in climate change. And the result was that in high school they study always less geography, so they don't understand they don't understand the world, how it's made. They know that there is a problem, but they don't how to say, they don't know how to find a solution. And they also see that the institutions are very slow. You see, the outcome of the COP26, for example, is this slowness, this gap, as you said before, with their state of mind and what institutions are making. So, which was the question? I'm lost. Too many.
Well, yeah. My question was quite general, but it was about whether you can see a change in the society's priorities when it comes to certain issues.
Yes.
Or these are generational differences.
Yeah, it's a generation. And I saw, for example, also here in Hungary, we were, as you said yesterday, this is a quarter of young hipsters. You know, you said something like that. And there are, for example, many cafes that I saw in the quarter. There is like vegan cafe, zero carbon cafe. I saw one other. So there is I think also in Hungary there is a consciousness that climate change is going to be the challenge of the future. But they feel alone in this challenge. Young people feel a bit alone because older people are against electric cars. They used to be, how to say, negationist. You know, they don't think that the climate change is because of human actions. There are a lot of people that think things like that. And yes, this is why I think that we have to reach young people, because they have a consciousness, they have a fear that we don't have, or we have much less than them. And we need to integrate our thoughts with them, because there is, I think there is a, on the background, there is a very little trust on our generation from their generation. So we need to talk each other much more.
Okay, so in the case of problem perception of young people, of all people, you saw in my slides, as a Hungarian, you look at my slides and it feels like we're the bad guys or something, because all these important issues, climate change, gender equality, they are so low on the list compared to other countries, your countries, especially all the Western countries. But, you know, just because it's low, I don't think it's insignificant. I don't think that people don't fear it. It's just people have to choose the most important one. And of course, in some other countries, the situation of democracy is not so terrible because they don't live in a hybrid regime. The situation of healthcare is not so terrible because it's not that you go into the hospital and 1 in 4 chance of you either dying or at least being infected. There was really excellent article about the amount of infections in hospitals recently that revealed that there are much more than we know. If you want to have housing in the Western countries, of course I'm not there and I'm not an expert on housing in Western countries, but all these issues are less present there. People worry less about the state of democracy. Or of course, just like here in Hungary, we say, oh yes, climate change is important, it's terrible, but people actually don't prioritize it. Probably in Western countries, they say, oh yes, rule of law is important, it's terrible, healthcare is terrible, but they don't prioritize it really because it's in a better shape than it is in Hungary. So I really wouldn't judge Hungarians and Hungarian youth for not prioritizing their worries for climate change, their worries for gender equality, because we are just not in a good place right now. And like I said, 4 years ago, before the terrible inflation, the food prices, before the housing crisis, before the war, before the pandemic, climate change was much higher in the preference list. And now it's not, but of course it can be. And it's unfortunately very easy now, in the case of climate change, to think of a recent climate disaster because there are just so many. But like you said, also education is important, and Hungarian education system is also sort of handicapped. I don't know how the American or the United States education system is. I have no reference. But in the case of the recent hurricanes, you know, 3 hurricanes or even more forming at the same time, also forming other tornadoes because the average temperature of the Caribbean Sea and so on increases, people are less likely to think that this is because of this geographical, physical phenomenon of rising average temperature of the ocean. And they will say, oh yes, they are trying to kill us with satellites and form tornadoes and hurricanes to destroy our homes. If you are more likely to believe that, you are more likely to believe in a conspiracy theory like we discussed yesterday at dinner, then you are likely to believe in geography, you're going to have a problem. And we have to consider the education system for that. Hungarian youth don't really stand a chance of making the the needed priority list for problem importance, even though climate change is tearing away, not just in the US, not just in other countries, but also in Hungary. We see the southern Hungarian region becoming a desert. We see water shortage. We see the biggest flood in 10 years, and we don't have water reserves to store the extra water and so on. So we also face climate change in a major way, but we don't realize it because we are not being educated, our young are not being educated to understand it. The school curriculum turns away from this kind of knowledge and turns to you becoming essentially a 3D printed lexicon of knowledge for like 2 years and then you forget. Anyway.
Yeah, I think it's a mix, like, you know, going back to your question. So I think some of the questions are just are very generational problems that our parents were not facing, like housing. In my slides, one of the key problems that Polish young people see, they know that they cannot afford to buy an apartment. And in Poland, it's to buy an apartment, to own an apartment is really on the top of your life priorities. Unlike in other countries, I don't know, Germany, Scandinavia, this is not priority, this is not the goal. In Poland, this is the goal, this is something that you should do, you should aim for, and you know, people don't understand why with the normal job, decent job, they will maybe never be able to buy an apartment. And so the world is changing. I think this is this generational problem that we can solve as a society, but maybe we will not, and this will stay with us. I'm more tend to, you know, lean on the direction that we will not really solve this problem quickly, and in 30 years this may still be a problem. I do not know that. But then there is also other things which I'm sure that they will stay with us, that there is a generational change that will stay with us. This is not just like a problem of this moment, like again, climate change, which are things that are coming with knowledge. We have knowledge that we did not have before, and we'll have to react, and this will definitely stay with us. And what's important for me, of course, there is the education, there is the knowledge, but also these problems, understanding of these problems is becoming extremely difficult to understand really the nuances of climate change or migrations, global migrations. This really requires more and more, I think, knowledge and education, and there are no simple answers because there is all this network, all these connections between different issues, and we see that people are more and more lost in this globalized world with these big globalized problems, and the fact that single governments or local governments cannot solve their problems. And then we go to the issue of anxiety. People are more and more lost. They think more and more about these things, that there is anxiety, there are psychological issues. And what's interesting, like there's a lot of data in the US, but also in other countries, liberals tend to be much more, liberals have much worse liberals tend to have much bigger mental health issues, problems than conservatives. One of the reasons, according to the scientists, is because actually they worry about these things, because they try to understand, and they worry, that they think more about violence, they think more about injustice, and so on and so forth. So all this is connected, and I believe all this will stay with us. And education system is one of the things we must change. Again, in the Polish example, education reforms done in last years were all directed into more factography, into more memorization, and less connecting the dots, understanding the big picture, critical thinking. And I think without that, we cannot even get a bit closer of understanding these global connections, and a bit closer of finding solutions. And this is the key. Now we have 1 year of this. We were exactly 1 year after the elections in Poland, and we're still looking forward, like for the big reforms, especially in education. We have little things, but we're still looking forward as a society, a majority who voted a year ago for the change, for what will happen with the schools, what will happen with the education system, because not much has been accomplished yet. And last thing I would like to finish, like, you know, I think every generation has this debates about younger people. Every generation tend to complain about younger people, that they are not as involved in the public life as we were, and so I think it's important not to blame anybody and not to complain. Like young people are part of the society, and there are some rights that they have because of the age. It is important for older generation just to create as many fields of involvements and as many fields of this intergenerational connections, so that the future problems can be solved together, not in as silos, right? Young people will not solve any problems by themselves. We will not solve any problems by themselves, and the older people will not solve any problems by themselves. So it's all about creating connections to find intergenerational solutions.
Thank you very much, and I really don't want to abuse my role as moderator, and I don't want to take more of your time than what we promised you before. But there is one round of of answers that I would certainly like to have, and this is something that without answering this question, I can't let you go. And especially because you have already touched upon this topic when you spoke about education and about the responsibility of older generations towards the young. Where do you believe the responsibility is lying when we are talking about the involvement of the youth and about the engagement of youth? Whose responsibility it is to first of all to get more young people more active in public life, public discourse, and which I think is also very important to prevent as much as possible radicalization. So give them an opportunity to have their voices heard within the acceptable limits of the society. I know this is again a bit complicated question, but probably a bit more tangible than the previous one. So this is something that I will really be happy if you could just say a couple of words about. Whose responsibility? The responsibility is the question. Who should do something and how?
Yeah, if I may, because I think this is where I finished my previous answer. I think it's our all responsibility, and again we can look at the state because it's always the easiest one to blame. Also, but it is the state's responsibility. It's the responsibility of the education system, but also of all other systems run by the state. They must be interconnected. They must work together to try to educate the new generation of people who will be active and ready to take responsibility and ready to lead change, to change all these areas that they identified as difficult or as worrisome. And but also this is our responsibility as a society, and the young people are parts of this society, right? So nothing we can do without them. The civil society must create spaces for dialogue and for involvement of young people, and the responsibility also lies on all levels, from local to regional to national to European, because young people are everywhere. So this is very obvious. So yeah, I would just like to stress that I really believe in this intergenerational initiatives, that we should not put anybody into a silo. We should not do programs only for young people without any connection with other generations.
Okay, I try to answer. But there is one possible explication. Can be the change of way we communicate and the amount of information that we have in our hands with the technology. So there is we can see this problem from the perspective of communication technology, because what happens after in 1990, there were the so-called cyber enthusiasts, people who thought that thanks to internet, the society would become more rational because we have lots of information available. But what happened is that people became more confused for having too much information, and particularly they get confused because it's very difficult to For example, understand if a news is a fake news or is a true news. Or this is particularly evident with those people that have a low level of education, because people with low level of education don't understand the source of a news, and they tend to believe also frequently fake news. But this provokes confusion and anxiety. And so I think that, yes, one possible answer is this one, that there has been a radical change in society because there has been a radical change in the way we get information and we communicate between ourselves. So it's not, how to say, the most attractive thing when you give an information is not anymore the content of the information, but the shape of the information. If the shape resounds with your thoughts, you accept it. If it doesn't, you don't stop to think about it and to think if what you already think is good or bad or is right or wrong. We live in an environment where we are bombed of information every day, every second. So we don't have the time to study or to reflect about this information. And this leads a lot of people to create like link based on trust with the influencer or whatever. So, as I said, it's like a regression to a tribal way to live. So we live in tribes. For example, there is an English anthropologist that she invented the term digital tribes, because actually every one of us is member of different groups, you know, the colleagues, the gym, the friends. And inside this group, the anthropologists are discovering that, and also inside the social network groups, they discovered that there is coming out like tribal behavior. And this may be one explication of the polarization, because when you are inside the tribe, you trust a lot and you consider true what is said, the arguments and the content inside the group, and you are often more closed with the members that are outside the group. In sociology, we call this echo chamber. This means that your thoughts are reflected by the other members of the group. And this can be one of the explanations of radicalization that you said before.
Okay. So the question was, whose responsibility is to involve the young generation? Which generation has to involve the young generation? And you know, already the question implies a separation of the generations. Well, really, this is not how it should be. The young generation should be involved in decision making. They should be involved in the reaching out process. I have to praise now Gabor for something he said in the beginning. He said, this is not the future generation, this is the current generation. And that's true. There's several generations living together currently, and whatever activity, political involvement, boosting is happening, it has to involve all of the generations. A party can't just be made up of 20-year-olds. It also can't just be made out of 70-year-olds. It has to have everything. And every generation has its strengths and weaknesses, and they have to, you know, use this. It is the current generation. I mean, we are measuring, or we are researching 25-year-old people. They were born in the previous millennia. Essentially, they've been here for 25 years. So it's not something in the future, not something external. And it's not that once the current political generation, once the current policymaker generation retires, withdraws from decision making, that's when the new generation comes and you just give the key and run away. It is a process of transferring responsibility, including the responsibility to involve all generations in decision making. It's a process that should be constant and not at some point in life or in a shift of a generation you hand all responsibility over. And maybe if, for example, in the case of Momentum in 2018 or 2022, this was more diverse, and it didn't feel like handing over your vote from the previous political generation to the new one. You would feel like there is always people in politics, and they are always experts of politics, and there are new voices being heard, and Momentum is a party which involves the new voices and the new ideas. Maybe you would be more inclined to vote, you would be more inclined to participate. In some respects, like you said in Italy, young people trust the generation of their grandparents more. In some respects, they want to hear more of the issues relevant to them from someone who is a similar demography as them, so we need everything together.
Antonio, Mivos, Marci, thank you very much for being here with us today and sharing the results, the findings of your researches, and then discussing all this with us. And thank you for being here for our first panel. But please don't go any far, because in roughly 10 minutes we are going to continue our conference with our second panel, which will focus more on the Hungarian situation of the young people. So thank you very much for your attention so far. Keep it up.